Hi, this is Alex Mahoney with Coda Financial Coaching. And a few of my clients have asked me about this program that Ally Bank now offers, where if you open an IRA account with them, they will match 3.5% of any contributions you make up to the IRS contribution limit. So, on its face, this seems like a really good deal, right? Like, hey, this is free money on the table. I got to get in on this, especially I'm already an existing Ally customer. I have a high yield savings account that I use for my emergency fund. Why not use that status as an existing customer to get into this as well? However, there are some pitfalls here, and this is a bit of a trap. It is a bit of a gimmick, and I'll get into that. But first of all, let's just go over what it is and what's actually on the table from Ally right now. So, big headline, right, is that you get a 3.5 contribution match. So, whatever you put in up to that limit through the end of 2026, they're going to give you pretty much a one time bonus, right? They're going to reward you for coming in, opening up an IRA with them. So, here it kind of gets into that detail. So, if you open the account between March 31st and July 31st of this year, they're going to let you make contributions up until December 31st. And within 90 days of those contributions, they're going to give you that bonus. So it's going to appear as interest income. And then, of course, you're free to invest that interest income, that bonus that they give you, in anything you want within this self directed IRA. So, just getting into some of the nitty gritty here. Of course, you do have to be an existing account holder. Once again, I'm not a sponsor of Ally, but they're kind of my go to recommendation for an emergency fund. I have an emergency fund with them just because they're an online bank. They give pretty competitive rates. They're very user friendly. They do things like they allow you to bucket that emergency fund where you can see basically like what is ear tagged within each of those buckets on that emergency fund. Like if you have this piece for, true emergencies, this for medical, etc., you can kind of go crazy with that, get into detail. That's what I like about it. That's why I use it personally, but I'm not sponsored. So if you are an account holder like that, you are eligible for this. So, and it offers both traditional and Roth IRAs. Just a reminder on what those are. A traditional IRA, you get that tax benefit upfront. Basically, if you make $50,000 a year, you throw $7,000 into this account. All other things being equal, now you're only going to be taxed as if you made $43,000. So it does give you benefits like this. Of course, not knowing about your tax situation in particular, in a vacuum, I recommend getting into the Roth as much as you can. It's just an incredible benefit to let any investments and interest grow completely tax free and not have to worry about the tax consequences on the back end at all. I think, especially if you're talking about a time span of, from your early 20s into retirement, you're talking about 40 years of tax free compounding. That's going to make up for any benefit you get from withdrawing in a lower tax bracket when you're retired. That's just my personal view and my personal opinion. So I do, in all my 401ks and IRAs, I keep those in Roth accounts right there. The other thing is it is self-directed. So this is a bit of a trap too. That basically just means you can invest it in whatever you want. I definitely don't invest going or advise going crazy with investing in individual stocks. You definitely want to get into a broad-based funds when we're talking about retirement, but that's a whole nother discussion right there. So of course here they just reiterate that they're going to match up to your annual contribution limit, which of course is set by the IRS right there. So if you do get into this, you want to max it out. So, okay, so now we know how it works, who's eligible. So the next logical question is this a good idea for me? And in a vacuum, I would say this is very gimmicky. And just be aware that when a bank offers you a bonus or they offer you, something free, quote unquote. Remember, these are not charities, right? These are sophisticated financial institutions that are trying to squeeze every last penny of interest that they can get. So there's always a catch. And even besides the fact that you have to keep your money in the account for 24 months, you can see here there's a 24-month holding period. Think about the majority of consumers are digging out of debt, and they're digging out not only of debt and consumer debt, but high interest debt. So any money that they have that goes towards stuff like this and chasing gimmicky bonuses, and that's not going towards paying down 20 to 30% debt, stuff like that, excuse me. The banks are they're literally laughing their way all the way to the bank, right? They're giving you this tiny little bonus that's paid out, within 90 days. And in the meantime, they're making a huge spread on the fact that you're not paying down that high interest debt. So that's all to say, if you're already on your financial journey and part of that right now is digging out of a huge pile of debt and paying down that debt and going through that debt snowball, you want to make sure you stay on that path, right? You don't want to be suckered into gimmicks like this. And there is some room if you're in a employer 401k to start and invest a little bit in that, but the majority of your capital really should be paying down that debt. So let's say that you're not in that situation. So what are the situations when you could be the one winning and actually beating the bank at its own game? So I would say there's two situations where this would apply. The first is if you are a bit younger and you're maybe between jobs, or you're in a job that doesn't offer a 401k with a match, right? And even if you don't have an emergency fund, as long as you've got some support, maybe you're living with a parent, some family, maybe you have some cash lying on the side to go along with that. In other words, you don't need to necessarily, you don't have a burning urgency to fund that emergency fund because you're not going to be out on the street, or you're likely, because you're young, to not have to, you're childless, you're not likely to incur any serious emergency expense. This may be a very good option for getting started early in the market and saving towards retirement. And the bank is just giving you an open invitation, an open hand to do that, right? Like, hey, I'm just a young buck with a little cash on hand. I don't really have a burning urgency for an emergency fund, but I do have a burning urgency to get started in the market, because as we know, the difference between starting on your retirement journey between even 20 and 30, even though you're talking about having, 30 versus 40 years and maybe, 10 years, it doesn't seem like that much of a difference over a span of 30 to 40 years. But in compounding terms, that is giant. You're talking about losing 10 years of compounding, and that is giant in the long run. So this is an open invitation. If you are in that situation where you're young and you don't have an employer match already, and you are, you don't need an emergency fund already, this is an open invitation to get started in the market and get some free money to boot, right? And if you don't like it, or you don't like Ally, you can always roll it into another IRA after 24 months. So that's one situation. The only other situation is if you have paid down all your high consumer or high interest consumer debt, right? And you've maxed out an employer 401k that has a match, right? You've already taken full advantage of that match. And now you're like, hey, I've got some, I'm not paying down debt. I'm making decent money. I have some capital on the side that I'd like to invest. And what better opportunity for me than to take an extra on top of the employer match in that you've already maxed out? Why not take a extra opportunity to get another match and open up an IRA account? And even though this once again locks up your capital for 24 months, hey, you're a long way from retirement anyway. There's no need to touch it. There's really no difference between having $7,000 in a excuse me, in a index fund that's within your employer 401k versus an index fund that is at Ally, right? Like functionally, that makes no difference. And then, like I said, if you like another IRA, like if you have like a big Vanguard account, you can always roll it forward at the end of the 24 period to then. So really, those are the only two situations where I could see this being a worthwhile endeavor. Just to recap, that is, you're young, you don't have access to that match. You want to get started on your journey, even if you don't have an emergency fund. This is a good way to get started on that financial journey. And the other option is if you have maxed out that employer match, why not just take advantage of this free money as well? It's not taking away from any debt that you're paying down. So, anyways, I hope I explained my reasoning as to when you should use gimmicks like this in general that the banks throw out there. If you have any questions or comments or any personal stories about how you intend to use something like this, if you are an Ally customer, please leave them in the comments, and I might make another video on this. But anyways, best of luck as of always on your financial journey, and keep plugging away.